Okay, hi everyone. My name is Stephanie Lloyd, and I'm here to talk to you about my experience of using Photovoice as a youth activity. This was something that I did this summer and in a remote space and in an interesting year in a difficult position. So we learned a lot of things and had a lot of fun along the way. So I'm gonna talk to you about my experience. So Zoom features for today, definitely use the chat, type in the chat as often as you want, whenever you need to. I have my colleague Laura will be helping to monitor that. During the discussion, it's helpful if you feel comfortable to start your video. We will record this session. We are recording this session for our YouTube channel, and these slides will be available for you all afterwards. So my name is Stephanie, as I said, and I'm here with Laura Lorenz today, and we're PhotovoiceWorldwide, which is an organization dedicated to training, consulting, products, and the community around Photovoice. So those individuals who are interested in using, learning, and understanding how to safely and ethically use Photovoice in their work with a variety of populations. And so we do these webinar series so that we can really bring our community together and we can learn together. We offer these webinars several times a year, and we welcome you to reach out if you have ideas for topics or anything that you might want to present, because we really want it to be an open sharing and learning forum for everyone who's kind of in our network. So Photovoice, just a really quick overview, developed in the 90s by Carolyn Wong. It was originally used with women in rural China, and this method allows cameras to be put in the hands of participants. So instead of researchers collecting the data, participants, or those who would be researched, are empowered to take photos, write captions, and help theme and help organize their experiences and their understanding of experience. So it goes through steps. There's learning about Photovoice, taking photographs, discussing them, writing captions, choosing which photographs to share, and then at the end of a project, opening it for some type of exhibit or presentation so others can learn about Photovoice and learn about the experiences. And this helps to kind of make sure that a wider range of people are learning and understanding what is needed, and also to enact policy change. And so this Young Changemakers with a Camera Photovoice project that was done, a few nuts and bolts here, it was done in August. It was 6 sessions that were 1 hour each. So we jumped online on Zoom in the morning for an hour. There were 5 youth participants, originally 6, and we had 1 kind of dropout along the way, which is something, as researchers know, happens. There were action steps, and these were kind of the in-between session. I didn't want to call it homework or work or anything that had to do with work, but these action steps included taking photos, writing captions, making sure, drawing pictures, anything that I wanted them to do, because it was only 6 hours of programming and it moves pretty quickly. So I had to have them do things in between to keep the sessions moving. I did have an intern work with me on this, and so there were parent notes that were sent out after every session, giving parents an idea of what we covered, what was important, exciting, and some, a quick nugget, because the parents were not online with us, and so they could hear what happened during the session. And then also field notes I thought were important. So if you have a co-facilitator, having them do that as well. And those field notes were for us to think about, and having somebody else look at the session critically, seeing exactly when the girls were engaged, when we could have strengthened what we needed to do, was important, so we could be reactive for every session, so that we, although the sessions were planned ahead of time, I could adjust some of the different pieces that we were doing based on what we were getting and the feedback we were getting in the moment. So I do suggest doing some type of parent note, field note, so that participants and families have an understanding of what's happening, and then also that you have a chance to reflect as the person who's leading the project. So a little bit of pre-planning. I gathered this was a group of Girl Scouts that had been assembled for a number of years, and I worked with one of their moms, one of the Girl Scout moms, and she actually facilitated the gathering of the group. So reaching out, asking this group if they were interested. Once we got, and then helping to set up the scheduling and plan when the dates would be. Once all of those kind of nuts and bolts were in place, then I sent the parents an info form with a little bit more about what this project would be, what it would entail, what the girls would get out of it, and then did consent forms for both parents and for the youth. Once parents and youth, once I received those completed consent forms, I gave everyone or each family a link to a Google Drive folder. I used Google Drive instead of Dropbox just because it was something that I had, from my mom, who was helping set this up, said that they had used Google Drive in school in the spring. And so they already kind of knew the nuts and bolts of this. Because it was only 6 hours of programming, I didn't have time to kind of walk through some of the mechanics. Maybe something a lesson learned might have been to do kind of a pre-session or something for half an hour where we go through Google Drive, we go through Zoom, we go through some of these things. That's something that came up along the way. The girls did have a pretty good grasp of Zoom, I will say. And so depends on who your group is and who you're meeting with, but they already knew about chat and screen share and breakout rooms and things from their spring education experience. And so, lucky for me, we didn't have to go through any of that, and because they had already had it. And then, the decision making on cameras, I really wanted to make this simple. Because this was a pilot program, I didn't want to mail out cameras or be restrictive. And so I really said they could use phones, iPads, whatever. They could borrow a camera. If it was a digital, a fancier digital camera, that was fine, but they needed to be able to upload to Google Drive. So in many cases, they were using phones and iPads, and borrowing devices from parents and things of that nature. So something I would note here, though, is this is something that was in the background information, and something that was that I discussed with the kind of lead mom, so to speak, beforehand, so that I had an understanding of where these kids were coming from, and making sure that everybody in the group kind of would have access to the same tool or same devices. And that's something I think is really important. In a different project, it might be important to mail out cameras, or it might be important to, support this in a different way, because it is important that students are able to focus on taking of pictures and what they want to share in those pictures, and not necessarily how they look and how great the quality and the art is. And so it actually is, we've done some projects in the past that have used disposable cameras, and it's actually really fun for participants to kind of do that throwback activity of using a disposable camera when everyone's on the same page. So everyone has it, and everyone only has 24 frames, and they've got to get it right. So, especially working with youth, making sure that your group that you're working with has access to the same type of device and will be able to equally share and work through this process. So the first thing I did was, I wanted them to introduce themselves. So there was a bit of pre-work or an action step before our first meeting, which involved them taking a photo and sending it to me through either Google Drive or email. And And then at the first session, I said, you know, tell everybody tell us their name and something they're excited about. And then they described the picture and the rest of the group had to guess which category it fit in. So something that has my favorite color, a pattern, something I want to change, or a detail I think no one has noticed. And so we're going to do that for a couple of my youth participant photos right now, if you all want to type in the chat. So which category do we think this was? Let me see if I can see my chat. So I'm seeing favorite color, a pattern, a pattern. So yes, this one was a pattern. We'll do a couple more of these. I can get my pattern, color. So this one was actually a detail that they didn't think anyone would notice. So the girl who took this photo talked about how the sunset almost looks like it's upside down. And so that was something that she didn't think that we would notice, which we had noticed. So this was a really good one. And my last one for this. Any guesses on the category here? Yeah, I'm seeing some favorite color, and that's what this one was, a favorite color. So this activity that I did kind of was an introduction to what, you know, before we even got started. It allowed, even though the girls knew each other, this was a different way for them to share a little bit about themselves. It was a way for me to get to know them and really, you know, kind of give some prompt around what they were supposed to be talking about, because I knew they already had this good rapport. They'd been together since first grade. They were going into sixth grade. So it was a way for them to kind of share something different that they maybe hadn't shared with their friends before, in a way that they hadn't shared before, and also to kind of kick us off. So that this is what they were going to be doing throughout several different sessions we were going to have, is to be able to take a photo and then describe it and describe why they took it. And so that was kind of an introduction to that experience. So then some considerations for the virtual setting. We were all online, we were all on Zoom, and so we weren't there having these face-to-face interactions. We weren't there able to move the photos around a table. And so a few different things that I did to, you know, adjust for this. So warm up and icebreakers, I found these really helpful before we, you know, jumped into any of the nitty gritty. What is this method about? What are we going to be doing? Or we did some caption writing. We did some categorizing. You know, these are some hard tasks, and I didn't want this to feel like a school or that somebody was, you know, forcing them to do something. And so I made sure that we kicked off with a warm-up icebreaker. I made them relevant to what we were working with. So you can see an example of some Photovoice bingo cards. Everyone had a bingo card, and for this activity, and if this was in one of the later sessions, and if they had taken something related to one of the items on the bingo card, then they got that square. And so this required a little bit of work ahead of time to email these out and make sure everyone had them pulled up, and you know, you putting them in the chat to folks, making sure everybody had their bingo card and then could recall the photos that they had taken for this project, and you know, identifying. But it was a fun warm up, and this is just an example of something that I did that kept it relative and all to the topic, but also fun. Frequent pulse checks and interaction. So making sure that you're frequently asking questions, having them respond. They use the chat. They really like using the emotions and the, you know, really like sharing their reactions. I had anything that was on the screen, I would have somebody read so that, you know, somebody was reading out loud and not me talking, and then they could respond to it in the chat, or they could respond to it using a thumbs up or one of the emotions. So a couple examples of slide, these were all on individual slides, and this came up, and just a few questions to kind of get them interactive and get them interacting in the discussion. Stretches and photo breaks. This is something I included in every single, you know, it's only an hour, but it's an hour we're sitting here. And so I made sure that we stood up physically, did a shakeout, did some stretching. Each person led us through a couple different stretches, really quick, 30 seconds, a minute, but making sure that everyone had a chance throughout the session to get up physically and shake out their body and then come back down. This is usually in between, you know, I've talked for a little bit, they might go to a breakout room, and then we stretch, and, you know, so that we're keeping the day moving. And then taking some screenshots are always fun, and giving them prompts to take those screenshots. So we took a roller coaster one, and everybody put their hands up and screamed, and so giving them prompts for the screenshot and photo taking was something that was exciting as well. Helping youth choose themes. This was something that was, you know, it can be a difficult task, and it can be something that's a little bit challenging to understand. We talked about it as in, you know, clothing in a clothing store, and how the shoes and the coats and the jackets, they're not all thrown on top of each other, because they want, you know, stores want to help you be able to select what it is you need and be able to easily find what you need, similar to the way things are organized in a library. And so we talked about, I used the word categories rather than themes. And we talked about how can we put our photos into some categories that make sense, so that when we're exhibiting, when we're sharing this, our audience will know exactly, you know, what we want to tell them about, and it'll feel like it's in an organized way. So I created some slides that ended up having a lot of their photos from everybody on them, and so that we could take a look at photos all together. And then I ended up dragging the ones that they wanted to put into different themes onto different slides. So I would have a slide of all of their photos, and we looked at those, and then as they started identifying themes, I started, you know, making new slides and putting those photos over. And that was kind of to recreate that we weren't there physically for them to be able to put paper up on a board or be able to move the pictures around. We had to do this, and I kind of had to take the lead on this, with them, you know, with them talking me through it, but making sure that we're going around and each girl had an opportunity to kind of share what they wanted and where they wanted to, what themes they thought represented, and what photos were put into those. And we talked about how multiple photos could fit under, or the same photo could fit under multiple themes. So here we have one slide that shows a group of photos and any guesses on the theme they came up with. Let me find my...
Play, outdoor play?
Yeah, outdoor play. Sounds good to me. That sounds like exactly spot on. They actually called this one, Things We Do in a Typical Summer, which I guess outdoor play can fall under that. So this was one of the, and there's more photos that fit under this category, but this is just an example of some of the photos that fit into this theme. Here's the next group of photos. Any guesses on this theme?
Summer sensations?
Summer sensations. Those are great guesses. This is summer necessities. So they talked about things you need for the summer, and popsicles being included in a need for the summer, and then foods you typically eat during the summer and not usually at other times of the year. And so these are some of the, as we took photos, then wrote captions, and then discussed how they all fit together. And these are photos from different participants that fit together under the summer's necessities. And then the last one for this section, just an example. And I'll give you this one. Things we're doing more of because of COVID. And so they're hiking a lot, they're doing a lot more swimming. People talked about backyard pools and hanging out with siblings because camps and other group activities weren't available this summer. Doing a lot of family trips and family walks was something that was specifically because of this, as they called it, COVID summer. And one last theme, and this is plants, flowers, vegetables represents growth. So they talked about planting gardens, planting flowers in the backyard, going on these nature walks. And so you'll see some of the photos from our nature walks, from our things we're doing more of because of COVID, are also captured here, because these are, we talked about how categories and themes can have some overlapping photos, but there were a lot of flower photos that were submitted throughout this. And I see the chat going. Is there any questions I can answer right now? Oh, what prompts were they given? Yeah, they were asked to take photos that categorized their summer. Things that they're doing, things that they're experiencing, and things that they wish they could do more of, or things that they're not doing. So I want to make sure that it's balanced between, positives and negatives. And I didn't specifically call this project the COVID project, but, it kind of morphed into that as they were talking about vacations that they weren't taking and things that they weren't able to do. People was a category that came up, and people that they weren't able to see, and people that they were able to see, but from a distance, or from, sitting outside across the yard from them. And so, yeah, my theme for this project was just reflecting on their summer as rising middle school girls. And this is what came out of it.
There's another comment in the chat, a question in the chat. Did you do individual captions or just group themes with titles?
Yes, we did individual captions. And so each girl worked on their own individual caption, and that was part of an action step, and also something that we did during one of the sessions was working on captions. I had them work in pairs and kind of write their captions. This was another thing that I did, is if for say this was all of the photos that were submitted from one person, I would put them on a slide, and then they would select a photo and say, okay, I want to talk about the purple flowers. So I would take that purple flower photo to a different slide, and I would actually write out their caption as they were narrating it to try to help them along. Just because this was, 6 hours, 6 sessions, and we're remote. So I did a little bit of helping them write them, and then they could revise as part of their action step. And then also with other photos that they took, they ended up writing the captions. So yes, they were all individual, and not every single photo that they took got a caption.
There was also a question about, did they take any pictures of people?
Yes, they did take pictures of people. In our first session before photos were taken, we did talk about careful photo taking, and, I didn't call it ethics, but it was a kind of a light ethics. and we talked about how to explain the project to others. And we did role playing with explaining the project and being able to tell people what you're doing and why you're doing it and where this is going to go. We had a consent form for them to give folks if they if they submitted pictures of family or friends. And so we did talk about that. And then some girls did submit some photos of family members and of people with faces and said that they had given consent. We also talked about how consent is a three-way street. And so they have all consented that I was able to use their photos in future presentations. And I was given written consent that it was okay to use their first names and their photos when I talked about this project in other places. So that was something that we definitely talked about and it is very important.
Another question, did you provide any one-on-one support on top of the 6 hours of group work?
I would say the one-on-one support came during, I mean, it could at off times. There were some of the girls had their own emails and would email me, oh, can you clarify, or does this work for, does this photo work, and a little bit of back and forth. Nothing that didn't happened outside of the formal Zoom session, but there was some email communication and a little bit of back and forth there. But yes, I had to basically make everything happen in the 6 hours, which is a little tight, I will let you know. So right in time, let's talk about a few challenges that I experienced during this. So, during the first, I frequently asked, are there any questions or anything people want to bring up? I'm opening the floor. And during the first session, I had a girl raise her hand and said, I don't understand. What are we doing here? What are we going to do? And I replied, that's a great question, because I'm not really sure either. This is a project that is really, Photovoice is a process, and no Photovoice project looks exactly the same, and it's participant driven. And so I will just identify helping youth understand what we're doing in a short time, having them get up to speed in the first session around what we're going to do, but also not really knowing. I didn't know what they were going to take pictures of, what they were going to end up wanting to share in their exhibit. And so, I broke it down into, we're going to take some photos, we're going to discuss some photos, we're going to write captions, and we're going to plan an exhibit where you can invite your friends and family to learn and share what we've done. Just those basic steps. But I really kept reiterating that this is your project from your point of view. And so this project will take the shape that we were here, me and the intern were here to guide you, and we're here to support you. And we're going to give you some options and some suggestions, but it really was your project. But I thought that was interesting and something to think about in your introduction sessions. Making something clear that's not exactly clear. And so, I went back to those session one slides and said, what do I need to do to make this a little less amorphous and a little more concrete, because it really was a good question. And it was, something interesting. When you've never heard of Photovoice and you've never done this before, they hadn't heard of this method, and they obviously hadn't gone through this process yet, so they didn't know what they were supposed to be expected to do. Another thing is creative ways to present photos. So, when you're in a remote environment, I presented these pictures as examples of presentations that had been done. And I told them that we wanted to take these presentation styles that were in person and translate it to the virtual. And so really getting to kind of the nuts and bolts of what is it that we want to do remotely. We want to have a presentation, we want to invite guests, and we want to share our ideas. And so then how can we do that? When we're not able to come together physically, what are the ways that we can do those things that can still check the box on presenting and to guests and sharing our ideas. And I think that this is a a little bit challenging to kind of understand when you're not having a formal event, how to make it a formal virtual event. In the end, we gave them a couple different ideas on how they could present. One was PowerPoint, one was Padlet, and one was using WeVideo, making a video. And so we gave them the options. They voted on the options, and when we ended up, my fabulous intern made a video, and this is on our YouTube site, and this link is clickable when you view this presentation afterwards. But it ended up working out really well, but it was difficult at first to think about how do we do something when we're not going to formally put photos on a wall and have people come see those. Another thing was wanting to include youth at every step. I really wanted this to be participatory, and so we needed an event flyer. My intern drafted up a couple different options of event flyers, and we had them vote. We had the girls vote on them. And then we also had them choose a photo that they wanted to put one of their photo. Each person got to choose one of their photos to go onto the event flyer. And this was something that was shared with them so that they could invite for the final exhibit. They invited a parent, a grandparent, a family member, 1 to 2 people to come jump on Zoom with us and hear about what they had been learning about, and then view the video and ask some questions. So it was, it is difficult when you don't have more than, 5 hours, 5.5 hours to put this together, and also you're not physically there with them. So we had to do some things on the back end to kind of move this process forward. So rather than having them design the flyer, which I would have loved, we had them vote on a flyer option. The other thing that just to keep in mind is taking into consideration current events and sensitive topics. And, with Photovoice, we want them to bring up anything that's on their minds, anything that they want to talk about, that they want to share about. This has been an incredibly hard year, and I won't go into all the different reasons why, you all know, but, wanting to also be sensitive to the fact that when you're on Zoom, it's harder to manage emotions and manage, some of these personal things that may be taking place. We let the girls know that they could always chat to us privately, and we tested how that works. We let them know that if they needed to go off video for any reason, and this was part of the group norms that we talked about up front. But just wanted to call out that, these girls, even though they're rising middle schoolers, they know what's happening around us and have some strong feelings about it. And so, making sure that we're sensitive to how, to what everyone's feeling, and making sure that I was calling on everyone and hearing from everyone at every step of the way, so that I could better manage what was happening and making sure that everyone was doing okay. And really was able to, when you don't see those physical reactions because you're in a virtual space, making sure that I took the slides down very often, so it was just all of our faces discussing, and then pop them back up. Just a way to kind of monitor and keep an eye on the pulse of the group. So something I feel important to mention, that it is important to bring up sensitive topics, or that if participants bring them up, to let them talk about it, but then making sure that you're monitoring what's happening and making sure everybody is having a good experience. I see the chat going. I'll pause again for some questions.
We had a question about whether Eventbrite was free, and I just did a little quick research. It's free for free events. And then here's a question: did they have their cameras on for all sessions?
Yes, the girls had their cameras on, and this was something that was, something that was part of the group norms, but it also was, coming from doing school remotely in the spring, they were used to it and they were excited. I think another thing I would encourage is because the group already knew each other, they were more than happy to have their cameras on and to, join in the conversation. And so I do want to stress that I think it's important to have a group, especially in a virtual setting, of kids who know each other or have worked together before, because there was less of that, shyness or monitoring feelings. They were able to speak up and talk about it. They enjoyed going to the breakout rooms together. They had a ball. One of the moms was saying, you know how silly it's getting. And I'm like, I know, but they come back with all their work done and we're doing a great job. So it really was a time in a summer that's difficult. It was a fun way to kind of laugh and take the edge off. And this was the first they were seeing of their friends during this summer because, they weren't able to go to camp and do some of the other things. So.
Another question is, did they get to choose who to invite to the online event?
Yes. So I encouraged everyone to invite at least one person. So I said 1 to 2 guests, and we brainstormed who these guests might be. I said parents. It could be a cousin or a sibling. It could be a grandparent. It could be a neighbor. Anyone who they wanted to share, and that's exactly who we got in the room. But I knew parents were busy, so I did want to encourage them to, invite a sibling or invite an aunt or uncle, and whoever they wanted to, they did. I used Eventbrite so that I could monitor them once people were coming into the room. I only allowed people that had registered for the Eventbrite, and I think that's something that's helpful when you're working virtually with youth. I also invited my sister to the event so that, following suit for what they were doing. And so we had a good group online to hear what they were saying and ask some questions at the last session, because I wanted to model what it would be like if we were having an in-person event.
Did you send reminders of meeting time and day?
Yes, I used a calendar invite, and as I said, some of the communication was through parents, and some of these girls had their own emails, and so I put them on the calendar invite. And then after each session, I was planning to send an email, but instead I just put the parent notes into the Google Drive folder for that session. I didn't want to send, I was just thinking about my own inbox. And so rather than, I sent something after the first session, and then after the last session, I sent girls individually. They got a PDF of a certificate, and I sent a survey link, a feedback survey link to the parents. But I didn't want to be sending after every single, these are on Tuesday, Thursday for 3 weeks. So I used the Google Drive folders as a way to share information without having to email every time. And so the handouts that we talked about, the screenshots that I took, I just put those all in everyone's individual folders so that they had access to them when they needed them, or when, wanted to check in on this project, they could check in.
How did you establish the group norms? And did you have a draft that you presented to the girls about those norms, or did they come up with them collaboratively from scratch?
I started them off, group norms are something that I like to do right from the beginning. So, we set the stage and we know how we're working. And so I did provide a few norms, and this is an opportunity where I had them, the group norms come, because I wasn't there to write them. I had them come up individually. We did a round robin, and I had each girl read one. And we talked through it. After I read it, we talked through it a little bit, and then I had somebody else read the next one. And then I opened the floor for additional ones. And so, this is just something that I wanted to do so early in the day and so early in our meeting time that I had to kind of give it a little scaffolding, because, you know, it's 9:30 in the morning, we're shy, we're jumping on, we don't know what Photovoice is, but mom signed me up for this. So that is something that I felt important. It felt that it was important to do, but also needed to provide a little bit of scaffolding.
Were they able to chat with each other privately via the Zoom chat?
Yes, they were.
Okay.
And because the group knew each other, I felt that that was not, you know, a security issue, because they had participated in Girl Scouts together since first grade. And so the moms all knew each other, the families knew each other. So I did allow for that to keep it fun, quite frankly. I wanted this to be anything but. I heard they had a kind of rough semester in the spring, transitioning from in-person school to Zoom, and, you know, teachers picking up the reins on how to present online pretty quickly. And so I didn't want this to be a glum session. I really wanted it to be a fun summer activity for them, even though we were staring at a screen.
Great info. Could you talk more about special considerations or protections you had to take working with youth, being that they are a vulnerable population? Any unanticipated challenges?
Yeah, you know, definitely when you're working with youth, I made sure that each parent, this is the importance of this, this consent form, and making sure that everybody's reading the information up front. And so I really didn't give access to the Zoom link or the Google Drive folder until I had a parent write me back and say, here's my consent form. You know, we're excited to participate. And I had some parents, of course, right up to the, you know, the day before, I'm nudging them like, I really need this, because it was important to me that they read every piece of it and that they send back an acknowledgement, you know, send back a personal email saying, this is okay, and we're ready to go. We're ready to get started. Because I did have some concerns, making sure to lock the meeting, making sure that I let people in individually and that it's only my group. We kept the group to 6. I thought that was pretty manageable. I told you one person had to drop out, but having it at 6 to 5 was very manageable. That was a way for me to also be able to send out individual emails. So I reached out to parents individually rather than the group, and made sure that I heard back from them individually. That was another thing I did, was having the Google Drive folders be individual. So we didn't have just one big project folder, which would have made it so much easier for me. But I, you know, because of concerns about sharing and, you know, I wanted each participant to have their own place where they could share something, where they could take out a photo if they didn't want it to be in the exhibit. We had within their group of folders, there was a folder for every session and then a final exhibit. And so they dragged the photos that they were okay with into the final exhibit, and they could put in the Word document with the corresponding captions. So yeah, a few things that I did to make sure that it was there, so that, you know, make sure, because they're a vulnerable population. This exhibit was something that also made me nervous. So I made sure that I sent out to the parents that they knew about the exhibit. They knew that, you know, that their daughter should be inviting somebody who would come cheer them on and ask some positive questions, and that they had a link to that. And then not, you know, really not accepting people in unless I had them on my specified list beforehand, which takes a little bit of time getting people in, but it's, you know, it's important to make sure that we're all online with who we think we're online with. And then I'll go back to the group knowing each other. So these families had kind of grown up together. And so I felt comfortable having an exhibit with grandma and with aunts, because the girls had known each other for a while.
We've got about 3 more questions so far. One being, for Photovoice remote Zoom sessions, is there a recommended number of participants?
Yeah, I think I was shooting for 6 to 8. I think that allows you to have the individual attention and be able to provide the individual attention and also the follow-up with each mom. That's six to eight different names and emails that you're keeping straight and going into the Google folders and dragging things on slides and putting them together. I did that to help the sessions move forward easily and nicely. And then making sure that I hear from everyone at every session. The photo presentations where they're presenting their photos and their captions, and you want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to talk and to share and that you're hearing from everyone. So I would recommend 6 to 8, and if you should have a rock star alongside you to help manage some of these pieces, I highly recommend, because there are pieces that need to be managed with the chat and putting people in breakout rooms and making sure everybody has the handouts or what they need and they understand everything and they can type to them separately. So
did you how did you evaluate the project?
yeah, so at the end of, at the end of every session, I made sure that I got some type of feedback mechanism from the girls. And I'll move through these slides.
One more
I know.
question.
Can I just answer this one
Yeah,
first?
sorry.
Okay, so, this isn't necessarily feedback mechanism, but this timed drawing is something that I did. And then they all presented and held up their drawings and then took a picture of them afterwards and put them in the Google folders. But this is popcorn style that I did, and the girls could respond to one of these questions at the end. Another thing was on reflections. And this, so at the end of every session, I made sure we did some type of feedback in which I was getting every girl online to tell me something about what they had experienced, what they liked, what they didn't like, their favorite part. We did a thumbs up, thumbs down at one point. And then I did have a feedback survey that I sent out to parents afterwards, just around timing, around how this was for their experience, whether their girl was able to, do this independently, or this was something that required a lot of family support, and then really just reactions to the final exhibit and this experience from them. So reactions from it. And I felt that with this, I was getting reflections from the girls along the way and asking them about, to say things along the way that allowed for feedback. And so I really directed the survey to parents only.
The three remaining questions so far are about obtaining informed consent and whether you used a platform for that. Also, any tips for facilitating the focus groups and sharing everyone's photos virtually? And finally, how did you use the breakout rooms for what types of activities?
Okay, that's a lot.
I'm sorry.
So, yes, obtaining consent. We had consent forms that were sent out, or we had consent forms that were in everyone's Google Drive folder. And so when they asked somebody if they could take their photo, then they were instructed to, if they were going to use a photo with a face in it, they were instructed to use these consent forms. And this was not something, everyone didn't take photos with people, but this was something that we made sure, and I made sure that I had a copy of those, and then that also, as we were sharing our photos in the discussions, that we would remind, did you get consent for this one? Did you get consent to share it in the session? Did you get consent to share it in the exhibit? Because those are separate consenting processes. So that's something that we talked about. And yes, I did that. Facilitating focus groups and sharing photos virtually. I highly recommend that you have your participants share their photos ahead of time. So their action steps were to take pictures each time, and they were supposed to put them into their Google Drive folders. And then, at around midnight the night before, 10 p.m. the night before, I would go click through each Google Drive folder and put them on slides. This really helped, even though the girls were great with sharing their screen, and some who didn't make it to the Google Drive before time ended up having to share their screen, but really helps with kind of moving forward with this process and moving the pace. And also it gives you an order to speak in. So if you have a slide with everyone's photos on them, and then you say, Stephanie, are you ready? Can you share about your photo? That, and then I can say, and the next person, you're on deck. So get yourself prepared, take a deep breath. And that really moves the conversation along. There's not these awkward pauses and trouble when we're trying to share. So I recommend another thing about having them share photos ahead of time, which this wasn't a problem in this project, but it's nice for me to be able to take a quick preview, a quick look at the photos, make sure that everything is safe and ethical, and there's no photos that shouldn't be shared with the group in there, and it gives the facilitator a chance to preview what's going to be shared during the session. And then I used breakout rooms. The girls loved breakout rooms, and I use these a lot to kind of break up the session, no pun intended. But so before we would share our photos, I would have them go into breakout rooms in pairs and say, we're going to talk about the photos you took. We're going to talk about why you took them, and so present to your partner about a photo you took, share why you took it, what you learned, and then have your partner ask questions and then share back. And so it was kind of a way for them to be able to share with one other person before we share with the whole group. It allows them to get some of their nervousness and their sillies out beforehand, so that they are ready to present to the larger group.
Did you see that last question that came up? Was there a specific reason why you were working with girls? This is someone who joined a little late, so they didn't hear the beginning. And was a gendered approach part of your objectives?
Yeah, I was working with a Girl Scout troop, so that was the reason for girls. And it wasn't necessarily gendered. It was, I do think, in a great way for girls to learn confidence and learn some of these skills. As young girls, they were going into middle school, but I think that this project is appropriate and can be tailored to a group of boys or a mixed group as well. The thing that was helpful is just that they all knew each other and had good rapport. So it wasn't necessarily that it was a gendered approach, but it was that I was working with a group of Girl Scouts, so it was a girls empowerment project, because that's where it led us to. And I'll switch to this next slide. I had a parent write me afterwards and said this was a great opportunity to learn how to have your voice heard, in a really powerful message, especially right now, and with what's happening in our country, and also, the girls being at such a formative stage. So it's not that it was necessarily a girl project, and it also was quite enjoyable that it was this time around. So hoping to get a Boy Scout troop to do this as well. And then I know we might have a couple more questions. So we are excited and interested in doing training for teachers, after school providers, parents, and that is something that is already on the schedule. And also if you have a larger group, you can reach out to us and we'll find a specific time for you all. And then if you have a group of youth and you think that they should participate in this, reach out to us and we will find a time and arrange sessions that'll meet your youth's needs, whether it's after school. This happened in the morning because it was summers, but we are happy to do that and excited to bring more groups, not necessarily just girls, but more groups of youth this opportunity. I think it's a unique experience. This was something that the parents hadn't heard of, and we're excited for them to do something different, to get off of some of the game systems and other things, and it gave them some critical thinking activities to do this summer, but in a fun way. And so I am opening up our last couple minutes if there's any other questions.
One more in the chat.
Yeah, high school age groups where they're not familiar with one another. Yeah, I think that definitely could work. I know that high school groups have done this, and you can do some higher level. They may be able to participate for a longer. We thought the lead mom and I thought that 6 sessions was probably sufficient. I think, maybe 8 would have been a little bit, we wouldn't have had to move so quickly through things. But I think with high school students, you maybe have a little bit longer time. You can also provide them with tasks and like some group work, having somebody design the flyer, having somebody create the video, having somebody, do some of these things that I had my intern do, and we just did, and we had them vote on them. But I would put these in the hands of high school students and having them do that work, because I think that they can take those tasks and run with them, especially if they have a little bit more time. Any other questions? Well, I truly appreciate you all being here today. It's been exciting to share this experience with you, and these are all great questions, and we look forward to building this out more as an opportunity for youth to participate in something exciting and something different, that they can then carry with them to school and beyond. So thank you all so much.